Thanks for accessing these I'm Curious About videos. In this session, Vicar Charlotte Lindberry interviews Reverend Tim Brown, who's the ELCA's Director for Stewardship, on 4 stewardship mindset shifts that are helpful for all of us to lean into. This is kind of part 2 to a stewardship series we had started with Vicar Charlotte back in May. I'd invite you to go back and access that session as well. But this was a rich discussion. We didn't actually break into small groups. We stayed in one large group and engaged in a good discussion with Reverend Brown about some of the ways that we can shift how we talk about stewardship. So we hope you enjoy this great discussion. At the very end of the video, we'd invite you to pause the video. There are questions there that you can use either for personal discernment, or if you're using this video with a group, you can use that for group discernment. What is one takeaway from what you heard? What is one way that you could implement some of what you learned in this session? So we hope this is a gift to you, and keep coming back. We look forward to these conversations on the 4th Tuesday of every month.
All right, good evening, everyone. And welcome to our curious conversation. I am Vicar Charlotte, as Pastor Matt mentioned. I am serving as intern at St. Paul's Lutheran Church here in Milwaukee, and we're really excited that we get to have Pastor Tim Brown with us tonight. He's the Director for Stewardship for ELCA Churchwide, and is going to talk to us a little bit about stewardship and, you know, some things to think about as you might be thinking about stewardship in your church, stewardship season, or stewardship all the time, and ways to think about that in a new light. So take it away, Pastor Tim. Oh, and if you would like to, if you have questions throughout the presentation, you can put them in the chat. And if they are pertinent to what's happening right away, then I'll keep an eye on that and jump in. And otherwise, you can use that as a way to write down your questions for later so you don't forget. Okay, now take it away.
All right, thank you, Vicar. Wonderful, Charlotte, to have you moderating. And yeah, if things pop up in the chat, let me know. Also, I will let you know a couple of things about myself. So my name is Tim Brown. I'm a pastor in the ELCA. I've been a pastor for 10 years in the parish, and about 5 years now as a full-time fundraiser. So I do pulpit supply, I do preaching, I write a lot of articles. You may have seen me in Living Lutheran or Christian Century or a couple other places. But I got into that because my second call was as the senior pastor of a large parish down here in Raleigh, North Carolina, where I currently live. And I had a huge budget, 1.2 million, and I had no idea how I was going to fund this church. And because of that, I sought out resources and educational opportunities on how to fundraise. And that's how I dropped into this role. But I've always been interested in stewardship. I think this is a life call. It's not always to do with your pocketbook. It's to do with your whole life. So when I took the director of congregational stewardship position here for the churchwide organization back in January, I took it with the understanding that I was going to expand stewardship to be not only about pocketbook issues, but also about your stewardship of voice, which is advocacy, your stewardship of land, which has to do with Lutherans Restoring Creation, which I work really closely with. Stewardship of building, which is different than land, because we all have some sort of physical property that we're able to steward, and we steward that in our life there and then in our afterlife there if we decide to sell it and do something else with it. And then I do a stewardship of time, how we spend our life, volunteering and whatnot. But the thing I get asked most about is stewardship of funds. This is something, especially as we are entering into what I hope is, but not quite, the post-pandemic world, how we talk about fundraising in this new reality. And so I'm going to talk primarily about 4 mindset shifts, which is how we think about our relationship not only to our pocketbooks and our time together, but also our relationships. And how that factors into what we call stewardship. Before we do that, though, I want to tell you that I am the father of 2 little boys, and so you might hear them. Finley and Alistair are downstairs. This is a rare night where we don't have baseball and we don't have soccer, and so you may hear them. It's also quite late over here in Raleigh. This is almost past my bedtime, and I'm not ashamed to say that at 41 years old. So I do have Java the Hutt, which I will be sipping from the whole night, just to let you know. And my partner is a professor of biology at William Peace University here, and she's wonderful. She's going to keep the guys quiet as much as possible, but if you hear that, apologies for that. Finally, I know we're talking to Wisconsinites, and I'm really grateful for that. I was a pastor in Chicago for 6 years, and I lived there for over 12, but I was never a Bears fan, and I'll let you know why. When I was a kid, my grandfather worked for Ma Bell, as we called it, and we're Florida born and raised. And he worked for Ma Bell, and he was like, listen, Tim, if you get the chance to buy into something and be a part of it, as a good union guy, you need to do it. And so early on, I chose the Packers as my team because it's the only team in the NFL that you can buy a piece of. And I'll prove it. I have the bona fides here. This is Mac. Yeah, Red Mac here in 1966, Super Bowl I champion, signed it for me and everything. And I have it framed here in my office. So cringe all you want if you're a hater, but I have to say that I'm a Wisconsin lover through and through. And I got to see the Packers beat the Bears on January 2nd back in 2012. And it was the best Christmas present I ever had. So put all the questions that you want. Wonk, wonk. Great. Very good, Sonia. Very good. Put all the questions that you want over there in the chat. I'm going to talk for about a half hour or 40 minutes or so. But I want you to ask questions in between. And if there's stuff I don't cover, if there's things that I mentioned that you're really interested in, like stewardship of voice or stewardship of land or stewardship of building, any of these things, please put them in there. Because if I don't have the answer for you, I'm going to go and research it and get back to you. All right. That's my promise to you. OK. I'm going to share my screen, and I am one of those rare millennials who actually doesn't love technology. So if I'm talking about something and you can't see my screen, you need to tell me and point it out quickly. Now, can you see a mindset shift? Can you see that over there? Is that up? Did I get a thumbs up?
Yes.
All right. Wonderful. Excellent. Thank you all very much. So when we're talking about stewardship, especially stewardship of our pocketbook, I want us to first think about the question, who taught you how to be generous? Who taught you in your life how to be generous? If you're thinking about this, go ahead and put it in the chat. Who taught you how to be generous? Was it your pastor? Was it your parents? Grandparents? Who was it?
Yeah, lots of people responding with their parents. Oh, one person says their grandparents.
Lovely. I saw Pastor Fluky on there. Daniel, it's great to see you, man. We are friends from when we were young and full of dreams.
And I'm going to leave partway through for a different meeting, so don't be offended.
I will not be offended. Never are. Anyone else?
Oh, Pastor Matt says his mother with money and his father with time and service to others. Same for Sonia.
That's beautiful. Yeah. So here's the thing about generosity. We imagine generosity as something that just happens, but it's actually something that's taught. And it's taught by people around us, and it's taught by us to others. The first time that I remember understanding generosity was when my grandmother died. And her name was Lady Brown. Believe it or not, Lady was her first name. Her middle name was Bess. And she always said, you have to know something about my grandmother. She was a wonderful woman. She was a church secretary for over 60 years. And she was also a 2-pack-a-day smoker. And so when she died, she had the voice of B. Arthur if B. Arthur had a cold, right? And so she would always say something about her name. She was Lady Bess Brown. And she would say, if you knew anybody who had a cow, their cow was either named Lady or Bess, and that's me. So this was a Lady Bess Brown. And she was a wonderful person. And when she died, We went down to her house in Miami Springs, Florida, where she had bought it with my grandfather for $10,000 back in 1948 with a GI loan that they paid back. And on her little reading desk, which is now in my parents' house, on the upstairs bedroom, we found a couple of things. We found her stationery, and we found her pens. She never did a typewriter, even as a church secretary, she could never do it. And we found her checkbook. And in her checkbook, for months in advance, she had written donations to her favorite things, her church, her favorite charities, her grandchildren, myself, and my brothers. And she had written them for months in advance because she knew these were things that she cared about. This is where her heart was. And that was the moment that I realized what generosity meant. It meant actually putting the things that you care about where your heart is in a very intentional way, because Jesus talks about this, but we all think, okay, yeah, we do that. If we did that, then our favorite things, the things that we're passionate about in this world, would be fully funded. And she did that. A good practice, if you want to take something away from this right now, and you can write this down, Daniel, I know you got to check out early. Here's one if you want to take it out. With your counsel, ask them who taught them to be generous. And just write it down. And then ask them, who do they want to teach to be generous in this world? And see what answers you get. And then the follow-up to that is, how are we going to do that? Generosity in our life actually is not about just writing checks, though. It's about these mindset shifts that we have to make. And we found this to be true, especially as we're weaning out of this pandemic. But it was true before this pandemic, too. The pandemic just kind of did what it did with everything. It pressed the accelerator a little bit. So here are the 4 mindset shifts. And the thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about each of these. And then I'm going to talk about churches that follow an old model and that follow a new model. And I'm going to tell you, you may see your church in both columns, the old model and the new model. And I don't want you to get discouraged, because every community, not just churches, every community is in both models. And our goal is to talk about how we transition from one model to the next model. All right. So the 4 mindset shifts. It all starts with discipleship. I got a call a couple of weeks ago. A congregation said, listen, we are about, heading into the fall, about $100,000 behind what we need. Now, $100,000 is a lot behind, but I'm going to tell you a truth, and this is a truth that they don't often tell people, but I want you to know that it's actually reality. Every nonprofit, not just churches, every nonprofit is usually in the red until December. Usually in the red until December. And why? Because the majority of our gifts, about 20 to 30% of our gifts, come in December. That's our habit. That's humanity's habit, right? That's how we do it at the end of year. This is where we give. And so folks get to July and they're like, oh no, we are way behind. We need to tell everybody, look, we're way behind and we need you to step up. We need you to do things. The problem with doing that is that, well, there's another truth that's competing with that. And the other truth that's competing with that is that nobody gives to the Titanic because they know it's going to sink. And if you're always sounding that alarm bell, you're actually teaching your folks to not pay attention to it. It's like when I was in the dorm at university and somebody would pull the fire alarm like every week. And so we would just sleep through the fire alarm. God forbid there was ever an actual fire. We would have never left. If we always tell folks that things are dire, that's never going to get them, that's never going to be motivating for them to give. And instead, what we need to do is lift up the wonderful things that we're doing in our parish, the life-changing work that we're doing. And so the mindset shift number 1 is it all starts with discipleship. So a couple of weeks ago, I got a call and they're saying $100,000 behind. What do we do? And I said, well, tell me, what are you planning to do for adult education this fall? And they said, I don't want to talk about adult education. I want to talk about the books. And I said, yeah, okay, all right. How do you welcome new members? What do you do with that? And they said, well, I don't want to talk about how we welcome new members. I want to talk about the spreadsheet in front of me. But the truth is that how we work with our people, how we teach them to be disciples in the world actually has a significant bearing on how they see their action in the parish and in the world working. And so it all starts with discipleships. We make disciples, not givers. Beloved, we make disciples, not givers. And the second truth follows that. Money follows mission. We were interviewing, when I was a parish pastor here in Raleigh, we were interviewing somebody for our music minister. And he's great. He's still there. He's a great friend of mine. And he asked this beautiful question when he was interviewing, a question that I will take with me no matter what job I ever take in the future, whether it's in the church or outside. He said, if your church was to close up shop today, what would the community say is missing? What would the community, not the people who sat in the pews, what would the community say is missing? Money follows mission. If you're not clear on your mission, then you really have to ask yourself, what are you doing for Christ's sake? And I mean that in a literal term, right? For the sake of Jesus Christ in this world, what are you doing? We have to be really clear on our mission. When I was a parish pastor in Chicago, we had this little coffee shop around the corner. And as you can see from Jabba the Hutt, I'm a lover of coffee. And Tara was the owner there, and she was awesome. And it was this great little coffee shop, little family-owned place. And down the street was a Starbucks. And the Starbucks closed for 2 weeks because they were remodeling. And I came to Tara because I was like, oh my gosh, you guys are full now, packed, because everybody that was going to Starbucks now came over to the grind. And I said, listen, what are you doing with all these folks? And she says, it's really fascinating because they come in and they would order what they usually order over at the Starbucks. And I said, yeah, what do you do with that? Can you make all those drinks? And she says, no, we don't make all those drinks. What we do is we tell them where the Starbucks is that's up the street. And she says, what we say is we do this and we do this, and we have these lattes and we have these mochas and we have these sorts of things. And you can have any of these things. And if you're looking for what you used to look for, you can go to this one over here that's two miles away. And I said, but you're losing business. And she says, but we're really clear on what we're good at. And that's what mission is. Mission is understanding what you are good at and being unapologetic about what you're good at and doing that well, the best. That's what you do. Money follows mission. If you're really clear on what that is, then your gifts will come because people believe in that. By the way, she got a lot of new adherents when that happened. People didn't go up the street. Sufficiency over scarcity. We used to use this word abundance, and abundance is great, but post-pandemic, I got to be honest with you, anytime my family has an abundance, we end up giving it away. And this was true pre-pandemic to an extent, but post-pandemic, it's become really true. If our cup runneth over, we try to give that away because that's the world that we're living in now. And so we use the word sufficiency. And sufficiency instead means you have everything you need. And I want to tell you, I truly believe in your parish, you have everything you need. The average Protestant gives 0.06 cents in their gifts to mission, right? And that's a day, right? So we have places to grow, we have places to move. You have everything you need, but the world tries to tell you you're lacking something. And your people may even believe that you're lacking something. But if you're really clear on how you're doing discipleship and you're really clear on mission, then you can tell them, no, we have everything we need. We are not in a scarcity model. We're in a sufficiency model. God has given us everything we need. We just have to work with it. We have to find out what that is. We have to finesse it, and we have to do it. And then finally, that fourth mindset shift is it's all about relationships. Relationships, relationships, relationships. It's like the realtor talking about location. Relationships make everything work. And these aren't relationships just with people you get along with, beloved. These are relationships with everybody, whether they're in your community or outside. And that means being really clear about what you do and who you are and how you're going to operate in the world. And it's okay to say goodbye to folks. And it's really great to say welcome to folks who need the place that you offer. So I'm going to talk about two different types of churches, and then we're going to move into some small groups. I know that I see the chat has lots of questions. I'm wondering, Vicar, is there anything that we need to address right now as I'm changing screens?
Actually, Matt and I have been kind of sharing out the tweetable moments, as he says, the highlights.
Okay, great, beautiful. That's exactly what we want. All right, I'm going to share this mindset shift number 1. Do you see it there? Should be 2, scarcity versus sufficiency.
Looks good.
Thumbs up if people can see this. All right. Also, thumbs up if this is helpful at all. Yeah. All right. Well, good. Well, I can only see 4 of you, so I'm going to take that as a yes. All right. Here we go. So this is actually number 3 on the list. But this is scarcity versus sufficiency churches. And you can see the scarcity church on one side, sufficient church on the other side. So in the scarcity church, you see this right here. It says that stewardship is silent. So they only talk about stewardship when they need to. And when they talk about it, it's probably in the fall. By the way, does anybody, and you're from Wisconsin, so you might know this. And you can tell I lived in Chicago for a long time when I say those days, and I apologize.
I'm from Chicago.
There we go. Thank you. Very good. I love it. So, does anybody know why we do stewardship campaigns in the fall?
To make the budget.
You think that, right? Thank you, Patsy. Yeah, that's a great answer. That's actually almost true. Almost true. Does anybody else know? The reason we do stewardship campaigns in the fall is because that's when the crops came in.
Oh.
And you would know how much money you had to spend when the crops came in. We still work in this agrarian model. And because we still work in this agrarian model, we still follow this pattern, which encourages me to tell you that if you don't want to have your stewardship campaign in the fall because your folks know when the crops come in January, then do your stewardship campaign in January, beloved. It's okay. You can do that. But if you're still working in this fall mentality, that means you're probably silent on stewardship until you hit the fall. And then you're like, 5, 6, 7 weeks on stewardship and you do it then. But the rest of the year, you're kind of silent about it. So it happens once a year, usually in the fall, because that's this old agrarian model. And when you pass the plate in the church, if you still do that, post-pandemic, some of us just put the plate in the church and you might walk past it, right? But if you pass the plate in the church, it's kind of like a timeout. The choir sings something beautiful, it's nice, right? Something like that will happen. Or there'll be a piano recital or something like that, but that's what it is. And the pastors and the deacons of the church kind of hide what they give. And what I mean by that is they don't talk about it openly. You don't have to say exactly what you give every year, but they don't talk about it openly at all, what they give. But in a sufficient church, a church that knows that God has provided everything that they need, stewardship is life, which means that we talk about not only stewardship of dollars, but stewardship of time, stewardship of voice, stewardship of land, stewardship of building, all these sorts of things that we have, which means that we'll do something probably in the winter and in the spring, you'll have something in the summer, and you'll have something in the fall. And it might not always be a stewardship campaign where we're asking for dollars, but it might be a letter writing campaign. It might be a Seasons of Creation campaign where we're doing liturgies around creation. This church that I was just talking with, they are planting a pollinator garden, and they're talking about ways that they can highlight this. And I'm like, folks, oh my God, when you bring up the offering, bring up some of the flowers that folks are donating and put them at the feet of the altar. What a wonderful symbol, right? Stewardship is life. This is what we're doing. We're giving our lives over to the benefits of the world for the sake of God. This is what we're doing. And so we talk about it frequently. And which means that we're probably going to highlight it a couple times a year. And it's not always going to be in the fall. It's going to be a couple times a year. But boy, the lectionary gives us some fall texts, right? We have lots of fall texts here. But I write on this extensively. There are texts throughout the year that talk about stewardship, not just about money, but about life, how we give ourselves away for the life of others. You want to talk about a season of stewardship? That is Lent, giving our life for the sake of the other. The offering becomes a high note. Let me tell you something that happened in my parish. I was doing some of this learning around stewardship, and we had the offering. It was traditional. We had these beautiful plates. They had the leather bottoms so that you couldn't tell if you were putting in a bill or a coin, right? That's why they have the leather bottoms or the velvet bottoms, right? To these offering plates. And I said, you know what happened this last week, folks? And we passed out the plates. The ushers took them. They started passing them out. I said, this is what happened. We had a family come to the church. This is true. We had a family come to the church. They couldn't pay the electric bill. And because of what you're doing right now, we were able to supply them for an electric bill for the whole month. What you do right now really matters. And then the next Sunday, I said, we got an offering taken up right now, and we're going to send youth to a youth camp this next summer in June. And what you're doing right now is helping that to happen. They're going to have life-changing experiences because of what you're doing right now. And it took 30 seconds to tell just a little story about what they were doing and how that impacted the life of the church, the life of the people that we were contacting in our community, in our parish, in the world hunger stuff, all sorts of things. And it took 30 seconds. And the choir was still able to sing beautiful things, and we were still able to have the offering as you know it. But this changed the whole trajectory on how offering went. But one cool thing we did, we said, you know what, this month, if you give anything that's not an envelope, like if you give a bill or coins or anything like that, anything that's not in an envelope or it's not given online, we're going to give it away this month. We're just going to give it away. And we highlighted a ministry we're going to give it away to. And I tell you what, people are like, well, isn't that going to take away from the offering we usually give? We got more offering than we had ever gotten before, because people gave their regular offering and they gave above because they understood where it was going. Offering in that moment became a high in the church service. It was a beautiful moment. And pastors and deacons talked about it. We modeled what we were doing. We talked about not only how we gave, but why we gave. And, my partner and I talked about not only us giving to the church, but we talked about giving to our university and how important that was to us. I'm from North Carolina. My wife went to Chapel Hill. This was a big thing here in Chapel Hill, right? I went to Valparaiso. They can use our money, but that's fine, right? But we talked about our work in the world and why we were doing it and what we expected out of it. It was a modeling moment. So if you understand scarcity versus sufficiency, you understand that God has given you everything that you need, and we don't need to be quiet about it. We can be honest about it. All right, we're going to move to number 2. Any questions on that?
I wonder if you could just talk for a second about some other kinds of campaigns. I know we're all probably familiar with campaigns asking for money, and you mentioned the flower garden one is a really cool idea. I wonder if you've seen any other examples of like a campaign for your time, or a campaign for a voice, or a campaign for some of the other things that we are stewards of.
Yeah, Vicar, that's great. Yes, absolutely. So you can honestly imagine a call to discipleship over any sort of work that changes lives in the world. So, for instance, in my parish in Chicago, one of the things that we would do is every time that it would become the equinox on spring or fall, right, we would bring flowers forward. And these flowers that we'd bring in the fall would be given away to people in the neighborhood. And in the spring, they would be planted for the garden later on that would be pollinator gardens. This was a campaign to beautification, right? A volunteering campaign. We would often do this kind of in the weeks leading up to God's Work Our Hands Sunday, where we'd ask people, if you're interested in volunteering for something, or if you volunteered for something in the last month, we want you to come forward with the offering, because your life is an offering here, right? And we would come bring them forward and we would bless them, right? Blessing of backpacks, blessing of, we have these things we call blessing bags in Raleigh here. We're kind of at the crossroads of where folks are traveling north to south on their transitional homeless journeys, right? And in the summer, they transition north, and in the fall, they transition south. And so because we're at this transition point, a lot of folks stop at our intersections to ask for money or food or supplies. And so we create these blessing bags that would give them feminine hygiene supplies and would give them some gift cards that they could use at local supermarkets and these sorts of things. And we would bring those forward and we would bless them at transitional times in the year, right? You can do all sorts of cool things at these moments that are mini campaigns for the life of your congregation. Yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for asking. Yeah. So along those lines, mindset shift number 2, stewardship is discipleship. All right. And this is the difference between a church that pretends ignorance versus a church that talks about knowledge. And so in a church that pretends ignorance, we guess at who our donors are. I talk to a lot of pastors and a lot of church leaders. I'm like, tell me your top 10 largest donors. And they'll often name folks out of ignorance. They'll name them because of how they dress on a Sunday morning, or the kind of car they drive, or the kind of house they live in, or something like that. And this was true in my first church. We didn't have access to those numbers, and we got access to those numbers, and we were blown away. Oftentimes, the most generous donors were the folks who drove the modest cars, who lived in the modest neighborhoods, who lived lives of quiet discipleship. And why this is important, it's not because you treat those donors differently. And I really want to hammer this home. If you treat your folks in your church differently because of what they give on a Sunday morning, that makes you a poor leader. My knowledge of that has nothing to do with how I treat folks, right? But if I'm doing something special, I need to know the folks who are most willing to give, the folks who have given before. If I'm going to kickstart a campaign, I need to know who to contact. So churches that are not taking discipleship seriously, they guess at their donors, and oftentimes for like church council, it's a popularity contest. For how they're going to make up their budget at the end of the year, they bank on hope. I hope we make it. You know, and if there's one thing you want to write down from this, I'm going to tell you this, beloved. Hope is wonderful. Hope is something I live on. Hope is not a strategy. Hope is not a strategy. And they ignore issues. They ignore issues in the church. So-and-so is upset. Well, okay, we're just going to brush that under the carpet. But a discipleship church, they know who the donors are. And this is difficult because folks are really worried about you knowing what they give. But if they trust you, then they know that that's not going to affect the way that you treat them. And if this is a hard road for you to go, do the top 20. Work with the treasurer and somebody else on the council and you and as a roster leader, and just figure out the top 20. Who are the top 20 givers in our church? And stewards lead. And so to be on council, you actually have to be giving in all sorts of ways. You have to be giving of your time, and you have to be giving your talents, and you have to be giving of your treasure. It's not a popularity contest. And we're going to call you out on your gifts. It's no good having a treasurer if nobody trusts that person in their life, right? And we bank on reality. This is where we are this far in the year. How are we going to get to where we want to be? And we make a strategy for it. And there's always a way to make a strategy for it. And we're open about issues. Folks are upset. Pastor mentioned this last week. Let's talk about it. You want to know why? Because I love you. And if people know you love them, we're willing to work through all sorts of things in this world. And I know that from being in a family that disagrees on a whole lot of stuff. All right, that's mindset shift number 2. I'm going to move on. Mindset shift number 3, money follows mission. This is the church of what are we here for versus the church that knows what their mission is. So the church of what are we here for, their mission is survival. We're going to stay with the lights on until that last coffin is pushed down the aisle and close up shop. The church of what are we here for is here to raise enough money to make budget this year. There's nothing less enticing for a millennial, and I'm a millennial. There's nothing less enticing for a millennial than to hear that we have to keep the lights on, right? That's something I do for my home. I want to do something else in the world. The church of what are we here for is about appeasement. Let's make everybody happy. If everybody's happy, they'll put their butts in the pew and they'll still give. That's what we'll do, right? And what are we here for? It's about the church. St. Mark's by the gas pump. My parents went here, my grandparents went here, their grandparents went here. We have to keep this thing alive. But a church that's about mission, the work they're doing is about fulfilling what God has called them to do in the world. And that mission can change. And it's okay to change. You can be about these things for 1 decade or even 1 century, and you can pivot and be about something else for the next century because God's call changes. And if you don't think that's true, read the story of the life of Elijah. And the mission is not about money, but it's about lives changed. Lives changed. How are you changing lives in this world? A good question to ask your counsel. How are we changing lives in this world, beloved? And if you have trouble answering that question, dig deep, because I bet you are. I bet you are. And in the places that you are, highlight those stories, because that's where you're making a difference. And it's not about appeasement, it's about discipleship. And discipleship means growth. And discipleship means uncomfortability. And discipleship means we're moving somewhere and we're doing something else. And so that makes it not about the church, St. Mark's by the gas pump, but it makes it about Jesus Christ. I'm following a church right now, and my good friend is a pastor there, and they've decided to close. And they've decided to close as a faithful act in their journey because they're about Jesus Christ. And what they're doing with that is they're deciding how to steward their gifts past their life. And if you think about it, well, tell me, what's the church that Paul in 1 Corinthians was writing to? Can anybody name the church?
He was writing to the Corinthians.
Yeah, he was writing to the Corinthians. Does anybody know the name of that church? It closed. And we're all still here, beloved. That's faithfulness. It's faithfulness. Faithfulness sees that it's not about the particulars, but about Jesus Christ and how that moves in the world. And if you're clear about your mission, then you understand when it's the right time to continue on and when it's the right time to move in a different direction. And that's faithfulness. A good thing to ask your counsel is that question that our music director asked us when I was in the parish. And he said, if your church closed tomorrow, what would the community miss? Just do it as a thought experiment. See what happens. See what they say. You'll find out what your mission is. All right, one last thing, and then we're going to break into small groups, and we're going to do all sorts of different questions, and you're going to tell me where I'm wrong and ask me questions about rightness, and that's absolutely what I want. So the last thing is the mindset shift is about relationship, and it's about different distance and proximity. Now, beloved, you're about to hear this text this Sunday about the rich man and Lazarus. Is anybody familiar with this? Thumbs up if you're familiar. You understand the rich man and Lazarus. I don't know what your roster leader, your pastor, your deacon, your faithful stewardship member is going to talk about this Sunday. But if I were preaching on this text, and I have for many years, and I will, I think, for many years, but if I were preaching on this text, I would talk about proximity. There's proximity between the wealthy person and the person at their gate. And that gap continues on, right? They talk about the chasm between the two in life and in death, right? There, proximity is the issue. And so if we're thinking about our life with our folks, I want us to talk about proximity. How close are we with our folks? And so we keep distance from our people because we fear rejection. And so we don't talk about that with those folks because they might get mad and then they'll leave, right? That's not a good reason to talk about hard, important things in this world, beloved. And our purpose is to please people. We have to please them, kind of that appeasement model that we had before. And we just have to keep them content so they keep coming. And I understand in a time of scarcity mentality, the contentment thing is real strong. But God has not placed us on this world to be content, but to grow. And so we treat people like children. And so we don't talk about hard things and we talk about anything but money, for sure. But if we're in a close relationship, and think about your family, And this is tough because these are strained times. But think about your family. My parents and I, my brothers and I, we talk about things with passion, and we still break bread together. And we don't want to fulfill, or we don't want to please people in the pews, but fulfill the mission that God has given us. And our goal is not contentment for folks, but growth for all of us, including me. Good Lord, how many times have I had to say, you're right, I'm wrong? One of my favorite poets and prophets in the world is Nayira Wahid. She's this wonderful poet and prophet, and she has this poem that I was just looking at today, and it says, if we both must be right, we're going to lose each other.
Mm.
It's okay. It's okay to admit there's gray moments and gray space in this world. And so we treat each other like adults. Adults can hold gray space. We can hold space for one another, and we can talk about difficult things like money, and we can talk about difficult things like how we use our voice in advocacy. And you and I might disagree on this, but we can both respect our ability to do this in the name of Christ. And we can talk about our use of land and building. And I remember when I was a parish pastor in Chicago, we had this wonderful building. It was old, it was historic, all sorts of cool things. And the teachers in Chicago went on strike, and they needed a place for these kids to go during the week because the strike was going to be weeks long. And so we were talking as a council about, well, we're going to host one of these strike schools at our building. It's not doing anything else during the week. Let's do it. And folks were like, well, what if they mess up the building? And I said, yeah, but what if we mess up our babies? What if we mess up our babies? Our babies are the ones that matter. Our building doesn't. We can talk about all things because that's what Christ calls us to do. So at this point, folks ask me, what are like 5 things that we can do right now to kind of enact these stewardship mind shifts in our lives right now. So I'm going to show you a couple, and you can tell me what you think. All right. And again, if this is not coming through, please tell me, because like I said, this is not my thing. 5 things you can do right now. You see it there?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to move this little box off to the side, right? Here we go. Right. 5 things you can do right now. So first, stewardship. 5 things you can do right now. Make saying thanks a regular discipline. Everyone likes a thank you note, a call, or a text. One of the things I had my council do when I was a parish pastor, and they hated it at first, and they got to be okay with it at the very end. I don't know that anybody loved it, but they all appreciated it when it ended, is at the beginning of every council meeting, I would pass out 5 names and 5 phone numbers and say, hey, call these people and just tell them one cool thing you saw happen in the church this month. And thank them for being a part of it. And every year, probably around Christmas time, we would write thank you notes to all the donors. And this was a big church, you know. We got 450 on a Sunday. That was a lot of thank you notes. Signed every one. And they weren't all signed by me. They were signed by folks in the church. We were really grateful that they were supporting us. And these were not even folks sometimes that even showed up in our pews. There were folks from far away that they gave to our ministries. If you can, take those numbers out of the bulletin. I'm talking about the numbers of attendance on this last Sunday. I'm talking about the numbers of the offering on this last week. And I'll tell you why. If you're a visitor and you see, hey, listen, I love the pastor. They're doing awesome things. I love the children's programming. Look at all these kids. I love the folks here. They're super sweet. They're really nice. But I see that they're $40,000 behind. This is a sinking ship. I'm not coming back. Those numbers don't do anything good for you. Put those numbers on a bulletin board out in the narthex so that folks who care about that can go look at it. And instead, in that spot in the bulletin where you had those numbers, tell a story about how your ministry is changing lives. Those folks are going to come back. Along those lines, use those moments around the offering to tell a stewardship story. A brief moment for mission inspires generosity. Number 4, rename your budget to reflect your priorities. It's not operating costs at the end of the year. You know what it is? It's ministry fuel. Operating costs is what my dishwasher cost me at the end of the year. You're doing stuff for Christ. This is ministry fuel. What's it going to cost for you to do your ministry this year? And then number 5, you get to figure that out. What's the thing that you're going to do and take away? All right, I've used up my allotted time. I know we got some breakout rooms to go to. Matt, Vicar Charlotte, anything that I'm missing or anything I need to address right now, or should we send them off to groups?
That's great. Let's go to groups. Matt, do you think for maybe 10 minutes, 7 minutes, so that we have time to come back and talk in the big group?
I'll stick around as late as we need tonight. It's okay.
Yeah. Here's what I'm wondering. Vicar Charlotte and I were like private messaging about this. I wonder if we just call an audible. We've got 15 minutes that could be good group discussion. And so I actually didn't go through the process of creating the small groups. Because I didn't take the time to do that because I thought for sure, with 15 minutes left, there might be some good group discussion here.
Sure.
I have the questions, Tim, that you sent us earlier today or earlier. I'll put those in the chat. So if you want to answer those, I think that would be really cool for you to just reflect on your own or to share with the group. So what's one thing that was mentioned that was an aha or made you think about something different? What's one thing that you'd like to try that you think would be helpful? Or what's something that you'd like to know more about? And that's where I think we could really get some good discussion here in the big group.
I'm also going to say that I'm going to put my email in the chat as well, and you're welcome to reach out to me individually or through Pastor Matt or Vicar Charlotte.
I would like to share an experience we had. We, as a congregation, agreed to provide school lunches for the church-related schools in our partner parish in Tanzania. And there was a big piece of cloth with individual symbols of money given for lunches. And that banner, and therefore the entire necessary money, arrived in 2 weeks. And it was announced from the pulpit what our generosity had done.
Oh, that's beautiful, Beth. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
That's really wonderful. And I would encourage you, lift that up as many times as you can. That's lives changed. That's lives changed. Thank you so much.
So I'll just have to say quick, I was the one who called this audible. Feel free to reflect out loud on any of those 3 questions. One thing that was an aha for you tonight, one thing you want to try, or what's something you'd like to know more about. Feel free to unmute, wave your hand. Vicar Charlotte will call on you, and any of those that are stirring something in you.
Yeah, Kathy.
She's mute.
All right, yeah, Matt, can you unmute Kathy, or if...
Now I think I did it.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Okay. I'm Kathy, and I have loved this. Stewardship is important to me in all the ways you said, and you brought forward some things that I hadn't really thought about. One of the things that happens at our church is that many people give their offering electronically, or they pay once a month. So we continue to pass the plates during worship, and it seems a little, it's just a little bit strange, because it's not like in the old days where everybody was passing their money or their envelope down. And I love the idea of highlighting something during that worship time. But I guess I'm looking for more options, and also not operating costs, but ministry fuel. So that, and then I have one more thing. I've served on our council before, so I always knew what our budget was and whether are we meeting it, are we not meeting it. And at the moment at our church, I really have no idea where we are. I don't know. I'm guessing we're really far behind, but I don't know. And this is something that I am bringing before our council, that it would be good to know, but perhaps to reframe it in the ways that you have suggested. Not that, well, we have no air conditioning because it's going to cost $100,000 to replace the air conditioning. And so it's not going to happen, but the heating system is working really well.
Right.
But to reframe things. So I'm trying to put this into our context.
Yeah. Oh, Kathy, thank you very much. I'm going to try my best to, Vicar, I sent you my email. Thank you for posting it for everybody. I sent it to you personally. I'm going to try my best to answer your questions. I'm going to miss one. And when I do, you're going to respond back to it. Okay. I'm going to answer your last question first, I think. When you're talking about not knowing where you are in the year, there should always be some place where you can find that information. I just don't think that it should be the place where every visitor views first. Some folks were even putting it on their website. Good Lord, don't do that, right? And it's not that it should be secret. It shouldn't be secret, but it shouldn't be the first thing you see, because the question isn't, are we fulfilling our budget? The question is, are we fulfilling our mission? That's the question. And if you want to know how you are on your budget, which helps fulfill that mission, that's the ministry fuel. There should be a place where you can look to access that information. It should be on a bulletin board, or you should know who the treasurer is, or you should have an email that you can contact, talk about those numbers that can be open to that. With the passing of the plate, this is something, especially post-pandemic, most people are giving online now, which I think is great. I'll tell you why I think giving online is great. Giving online is great because it takes out the guesswork in the summer. A lot of people do that on automatic renewal. And automatic renewal means that you're going to be really consistent in the summer. The switch comes at the end of the year when you want folks to increase that with their raises or something like that, right? And so you have to remind them to do that sort of thing, right? And increase that giving. One of the things that you can do, though, is you can have slips of paper in the pew, or you can have even laminated pieces of paper that say I gave online, that folks can put in the plate as it comes forward. The slips of paper in the pew could be like, listen, I gave this in offering. We're not going to talk about that, but this is the way I'm going to volunteer this month. And they can write that down. And then you can highlight that later on. You can include that in the prayers if your pastor is good off the cuff, right? All sorts of cool things that you can do with that, where folks are going to volunteer this month. Another thing that I've seen folks do is the plate comes back empty, right? But they talk about how this emptiness means sufficiency for their community, because people are giving online, which means we're able to do this and this and this week. The symbol of the plate is really important insofar as it gives a story. But if you can replace that with an actual story of the life-changing work that you're doing, that changes things. One final moment on that, though. When we started giving away our loose offering, these were offerings that were not in an envelope, they were not given online. When we started giving away our loose offering, we started getting tons of stuff in the plate, little dollars, right? But it's because people were giving online and they were bringing dollars to church because they knew it was going to the homeless shelter. It was going to the LGBTQ center in Raleigh, right? It was going to all these different places that we were supporting, and it doubled our impact. There are ways that you can do this. Don't be afraid to give money away, because people will respond to God's call. I missed something in there, though. Oh, your air conditioning. Kathy, when you're thinking about the air conditioning, what I want you to think about is all the things, all the awesome things, all the cool life-changing things that happen in your building in a given week. Because it's not about fixing the air conditioner. It's about making sure that the kids on the corner have a safe place to play basketball in your gymnasium. And it's about the VBS that happens this summer that reaches 200 kids in the community and they don't have another place to go. That's what the air conditioning is for. And it's about the homeless shelter that comes every other Saturday and camps out in your Sunday school rooms. That's what the air conditioning is for. Yeah. Did I answer your question? Thumbs up. All right. Thank you. Thanks, sister. Appreciate the question.
Yeah, Pastor Tim, just to add on to that piece you said at the end, I've seen one church that had the mortgage is the mission as their stewardship motto, and showed all the things that their building was used for.
Yep. Yep.
It's a cool way to do it. Sonia has her little virtual hand up.
You're gonna hear a little one in the back probably. And see
I miss that age. I miss that age.
No, you don't. No, you don't. No, you don't. Not really.
Until they get that age.
But I say that I really, there's so much information that you've given us to think about using any part of it, because unfortunately, and it's not just Lutheran, it's not just the ELCA, but we become so set in our ways on doing that. I know in my congregation, you know, you have the bulletin and you're going on and on and on. I don't even think we even say anything about, you know, the offering. It's time for the offering. Yeah. And they pass the plate and that's it. And it's like, it's a time where we could talk about, you know, what you're giving today, you know, just anything. It's like all of those little things, and some of them are big things, but simple. And I use that word very sparingly. Simply changing your mindset about any given thing is huge.
Yeah.
And as human beings, we're so set to do things this way, or this is how it's done, and we go berserk or feel like we're gonna, you know, sky if we change any little thing. And I'm just like, oh my goodness, like we just got a new pastor. He's bringing back our evening service, see how it goes, and he's changing how the service went. And I'm thinking to myself, you know, a couple people gonna be like, you know, hey, this is cool. And some people gonna, are we doing this way? Why? Yeah. Come on, we haven't had a pastor for 4 or 5 years. Just let it go. Ooh. Let it go. So I really wanna, I mean, we could use everything and just coming up with different ways to think about stewardship, period. You know, man, it's amazing. Thank you. And I've already emailed you.
Well, thank you, Sonia, and I appreciate the comment. I'm going to tell you a hard truth, and this is a truth for everybody in the room, and this is a truth that it took me, I'm 41 years old. This is a truth that took me at least a good 39 to figure out, and that's me thinking I was cognizant at 3. We don't think our way into new ways of behaving. We behave our ways into new ways of thinking. And if the opposite was true, we would all be fit as a fiddle, and our money would go exactly where we wanted it to go, because we think about these things and we're like, that's what I want to do. But Jesus is right. Where your treasure is, there your heart is also, right? You can't think your way into a new way of doing. You have to do your way into a new way of thinking. So what I would say, Sonia, maybe one of the things that you can do, and God bless your pastor and love on them as much as you can, as they're trying to do a new thing. But one cool thing you might do every week is like, hey, pastor, tell me something awesome that happened this week at church. And then say, why don't you tell people that in the announcements? I think they'd like to hear that. Or why don't you tell people that during the offering time, right at the very beginning? Take you 15 seconds. I'd like to hear that. Or if you don't want to do it, I'll do it. I'll bring my baby up, right? I'm gonna make an announcement here. I'll do it. And if
I have no problem with that. You don't know me, but they all do.
I know, you're right. But I'm gonna tell you that if you start doing that, I think one of the things that you, and even make a commitment, like it's like a workout routine. We're gonna do this for 2 months, see how it goes. Just try it. I think once you do it, you'll find a new way of thinking. And I would say just have the boldness, take the initiative. I feel you can and you will. But that's one way that you can also encourage your pastor to get in on the scene, right?
Yeah.
What's one cool thing that happened this week?
This is the first time, sorry to interrupt, this is the first time since church period forever that I even feel positive about stewardship. I'm just saying.
Oh, well, I appreciate
listening to you, because I'm like, every time they brought up stewardship, I was like, just give me my paper, let me sign it.
Well, keep it up, Charlotte. I want to give you, or Sonia, I want to give you lots of love on that. You can do it. All right. Thank you, Sonia. And God loves that little baby. God, I know. I don't miss it, but I kind of miss it. Other questions in the room? I'm willing to stick around. I think this is really important.
I don't know how to raise my hand.
Well, you can just raise it, Patsy. That's okay. You're off mute.
You heard me. Oh.
Yeah, you're off mute.
You know, it's funny. You mentioned where your treasure is, your heart will be also. I'm doing the stewardship for our church this year. I've been involved with council. I just moved to Milwaukee 10 years ago, and I know I don't look elderly, but I am. Okay. But I really feel a calling to the stewardship thing with our churches. The pandemic has stripped us dry.
Yeah.
It's the only thing I can think of. We're having such a hard time getting back. The people are lethargic. It's just, they're not finding any joy. You know, the hope is gone.
Yeah.
So for 3 Sundays coming up, I'm using that where your treasure is, your heart is the theme that I'm going for, and how we can joyfully give. And I've got 3 Sundays of temple things that I'm going to do that will require thinking about money is only the first thing. The second thing that we're really lacking in is our stewardship of time. You got to make the time to come to church, to be with us, because, and I'm only using like a roaring fire or something. When we're together, we can burn. If you're trying to do something on your own, you're an ember out there and you're going to burn out real fast.
Yeah.
We need you back with us, but I don't know how to I have plenty of joy within my soul. I've never had like you know, I do feel that you always have enough. We have enough in our church, but we're so beat down by our building. Well, you know, this broke last week and that'll break next week, and and it's hard to get the people out of the mindset and be joyful about, turn it around and say, well, now we've got a fixed water pipe in, or we can do dinners again in the kitchen or something. You know, yeah. It's hard to inspire people.
Yeah, you know, and Patsy, you're bringing up a good point, and this is something I'll tell you all year long, every year, and it was true before the pandemic, and it's even more true after the pandemic. Inspiration beats information every day. So if you want to tell people why they should come back to church, just go ahead and stay home. I want you to tell a story about a life changed in your community.
Okay.
And then folks will come. This reminds me of C.S. Lewis's The Screwtape Letters, and I don't know if y'all are familiar with that, but I read Lewis pretty religiously, no pun intended. And one of the things that Screwtape complains about is that Jesus never compels, only woos. Jesus only woos hearts. And so it's hard to combat a wooed heart. A compelled heart, you can combat that all day, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't want to do that. You're making me do it. Tell the story. How is your church changing lives? It's not about the water pipe. It's about the baby who gets to drink from that water pipe. It's about the folks in your pew who get to drink from that water pipe. these are the things that change lives and change hearts and get people back into the community. And I don't think people should go to church. I think people need a place where they can be themselves. And I find church to be one of those places that happens.
Okay.
Beloved, we're the only two places in the world where we sing together. I'll tell you where they are right now. At the bar or in the sanctuary. I'd much rather find you at the second, but I'll definitely find you at the first. Let's talk about the things that we do together and how that changes lives. And that will have that here. And one final note on this, and I think this is a really important, Patsy.
Okay.
Some of the folks that have left are not coming back, and we need to mourn that. That's just sad. We miss them. We wish they would, right? We wish they would. We just said. But there are lots of new folks that are in those pews that want to be there.
Okay.
Or that could be there. And so that's the community we're going to work with. And if
Okay.
we make beautiful stories, some of those other folks will come back.
Okay.
Yeah. I see a couple. Larry, I wonder if an offering moment, Vicar Charlotte's ring, that might be helpful to point out the ministry. Larry, you were talking about we don't pass the plate anymore, right? Totally fine. You don't have to pass the plate to do an offering moment, as Vicar Charlotte says. They're right. You don't have to pass the plate to do an offering moment. You can do an offering moment anyway. And you can encourage people to move it back. If it makes sense in your context to do another offering moment, start passing that plate again. Or, you know what? Pass around one plate, even if it's symbolic, just for that moment, so that you take the time out to tell the story and you have that moment. It's totally fine. What you want to do is impart to people how their gifts are used in this community. That's the important part there. Are there other questions or thoughts?
I want to brag on our associate pastor. I have fed him the numbers from Outreach for Hope. He has shared them from the pulpit. Sunday, he got applause.
Well, God bless that pastor, and make sure you're loving on your roster leaders in the ways that you can here, because it's a really hard job, especially right now. But I would always say, anytime you're going to share a number, share a story that follows that number. All right.
Okay.
Share a story of a life change that follows that number, because it's not about the number of meals we passed out. Folks do that all the time. We passed out 192 meals this last week. Beautiful. You know, I licked 192 stamps the week before, because that's part of the job, right? Tell a story that follows that number. Stories contain truths that facts cannot bear. Stories contain truths that facts cannot bear. This is why Jesus taught in parables, because stories are the things that move the heart. And when the heart is moved, the mind will follow, the body will follow, all those sorts of things will follow. Tell the stories. The work that you all are doing in the parish is inspiring to me. It's why I took this position. It's why I love my job, and why I love trying to help you figure out these sort of puzzles. Tell the stories. You're doing beautiful things in your communities. Any other thoughts? I know we're over time. I feel bad about that.
If we didn't want to be here, we would just disappear.
That's okay. I haven't been drinking my coffee as much. I'm feeling awake, but I'm like, oh, this is getting cold.
It looks like somebody from the Pastor Kristen, Renee, Pam, Karen screen is talking. I don't know if you're talking amongst yourselves or.
Oh, the ad hoc stewardship team. Yeah.
Yeah, we're good. We're laughing. We're enjoying this and soaking it all in.
Awesome.
Okay. Well, I had asked Vicar Charlotte if I could just close us tonight briefly with a reminder that the last curious conversation we had back in May was with Vicar Charlotte, presenting to us, also talking about stewardship. So if you found this motivating, all of these videos are on milwaukeesynod.org/curious, and you can go back and watch the one where we talked with Vicar Charlotte about some similar things, but also kind of an expanded conversation. So the two conversations will be very complementary. So I just invite you to go back and check that out. And if this is an area of passion for you, an area of interest, you've got lots of willing partners close by and in Tim as well. So I know that this is an area of passion for Vicar Charlotte. I know it's an area of passion for me. And Tim, thank you for making yourself available to us as well. So we did not pray on the way in. I'm wondering if I can pray for all of you on the way out. Does that sound good?
Okay.
The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
God, we thank you for the ways that even this very moment with technology shows us how your world works. That the technology that's connecting us right now was invented over a span of many, many years with thousands, hundreds of thousands of people doing their little part. Some people invented little transistors. Some people invented the screens on our laptops. Some people worked on Wi-Fi technology. All of it has come together to allow us to connect with each other tonight and feel inspired by your love. Help us to realize that every Sunday, and even the days in between the Sundays, you do the same thing in our churches. Each one of us brings our part, and you bring it all together to make a difference in the world with your love. Help us to take comfort in that, take joy in it, and share it with all that we meet. We thank you for that gift in Jesus' name. Amen.
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 All right. We'll be together next month on the 4th Tuesday talking about how to start new things in the church. New ministries, new little ministries, new big ministries, whatever. And we're going to have some really fun conversations around that. So one last time, thank you very much, Tim, for being with us, and Vicar Charlotte for
Thank
hosting
you.
our conversation tonight.
Thank you for the invitation, and hope to meet you all in person one day when we're young and full of dreams.
Yes.